So we are going to talk a little bit about, I think in the last call, we sort of shared that we're moving into this May revise stage and things start picking up in pace. So on today's agenda, first we'll talk about just this amazing op-ed that was put out there. And I was going to say, I'm going to put you on the spot. And because you have much more background about the person who wrote the op-ed and just about it. And so why should I talk about it? You should talk about it. So I'm going to put you on the spot and see if you'd be willing to just talk a little bit about the op-ed. Then we're going to talk about just some actions that we can all take as part of this coalition, like today or tomorrow, and then some stuff next week. And this is like getting into the nitty gritty, getting toward that final stretch. So really exciting and also really critical time. And then we'll see if there's any discussion or questions that people have. But I will turn it over, Jenny, to you to talk about this amazing op-ed first.
Hi. All right. Well, I'm Jenny Espinoza. There we go. And I am executive director of a program called Back to the Start. We're relatively new, and we work with individuals who are incarcerated and help them to write narratives about their childhood, to leverage those to drive support for upstream spending and really trying to interrupt the cradle to prison pipeline. And so actually just today, we have an op-ed that someone in our program wrote who was in the foster care system since he was 2. And he wrote about those experiences as they relate to the proposed budget cuts for the programs that you are all familiar with, for FERS, for the housing navigation and maintenance program, and for SILP. And so it kind of takes the reader through his experience and how those programs would have helped him, and how we're going backwards. And it appeals, if we actually go through with these cuts, and it appeals to the governor to protect foster youth. And so I mean, the whole point of doing this was really to leverage it and get the governor's attention, get the attention of our policymakers, especially in this last push before the May revise. And so I'm just happy that we're talking about it here. And I encourage you to look at it and put the word out, and feel free to repost it. And we're just trying to get as much traction as possible, both for now and the revise, but also just in the grander scheme of things in terms of prioritizing our foster youth. So hopefully that helps with some context. Let me know if there's any questions and how else we could be helpful.
Thanks, Jenny. And Back to the Start has posted on their social media outlets, so you can of course follow them, repost, do all that stuff. We also put sort of just like you see here, a clip of the article that we posted on social media, like an image of it. And that's in the social media toolkit. So that's, if you want to use that one, whatever you want to do. But I think it's a great article to share. It's nice to have different op-eds from different perspectives, different angles, different things for people to think about. What I thought about when I read this was, it didn't come across as someone not taking responsibility for their actions. Like, I'm serving life in prison, I made mistakes and I'm paying for them now. But it made you reflect on, I mean, my first thought was, if this man had not experienced what he experienced in the foster care system, or if he had more supports, he probably wouldn't be where he is, right? And it makes you kind of come to that natural conclusion, and there's a lot at stake. So I think it was really powerful and a really unique angle, and really brave of him to put this out here. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank
Any
you.
questions or?
Also, just piggybacking on that, say that I think one interesting point is he talks about how it costs $133,000 a year to support each person in California State Prison. and how we're paying such a higher price now, especially in, comparison to the cost of these programs that are upstream and that are preventative, and without saying it specifically, but like how does that make sense?
It doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any questions or thoughts from anyone before we move on?
One thing I just want to say is I noticed our toolkit, the most current ones are at the bottom. We're going to reverse it so the most current ones are at the top, so you don't have to scroll all the way down.
Good idea.
But this one is at the bottom, but we'll flip it around. So all you have to do is go to that top one and load it out. But this is, I want to share with what everyone's saying. This one, I read a lot of these, but the fact that he's taking the time to write this, it spoke deeply to my heart. And thank you for your work. And I hope he knows that he's making a difference.
I'll pass along your comments when I see him tomorrow. He's in prison, so he hasn't even seen it yet. And so I'm gonna print out a picture of it for him as well. But he just really wanted to try to make a difference and to help other children not have to go through the same thing he did. So thank you.
That's great. All right. I'll move us along here. So this is one of our big action items for today, be tomorrow morning. We reported back from that April 25th Senate Budget Subcommittee 3 hearing, and I actually can't recall if I think we talked about this a little bit, but in that hearing during the panel on rate reform, there was discussion about well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Like trying to find what people perceive to maybe be some sort of middle ground between what's proposed by the SILP housing as the SILP housing supplement currently stands and what's being proposed in rates reform. Unfortunately, what was sort of this option that was floated in the hearing is not at all a middle ground. I mean, what it is, unfortunately, is not based on reality. What it's based on is this idea that young people that are in SILPs, if this foster care reform moves forward as is, they would receive this rate of $1,788. And we know that they have the potential to access $500 worth of kind of extracurricular activities that go through this spending plan manager. It is not part of their monthly income. It is not cash money. There is no guarantee. I mean, the intention is that everyone gets it, but we all know how this goes administratively. And when something doesn't come directly to young people and there's discretion around who gets it and what it's used for, and an itemizing of every spend, like we know that there will be administrative barriers to this. So we don't want that $500 to be counted as their monthly income with this idea that, oh, they're actually not receiving $1,788, they're receiving $2,288. That's false. So what was floated in this hearing was youth are receiving $2,288. And that's almost at above all the levels that the SILP housing supplement would have got people to. So let's just resource the 5 highest cost counties who would have been above that and then call it a day. And as I shared, that's not achieving the goal of the SILP housing supplement, which is to adequately resource people in their monthly income to afford housing in their county. And we know that it will not prevent homelessness. It will not stop 1 in 5 young people from experiencing homelessness and extended foster care. So we want to make sure that there's a clear message that both this coalition opposes that and that it's not based on correct information. So what we need to do, because this has been discussed not just in the Senate, but now the Assembly is getting wind of it. We want to equip key members of the Senate and the Assembly with that information. So we've started talking with necessary folks in the Senate and the Assembly. But what they've said to us very loud and clear is that we need to be loud and clear. This is not a normal year. We need to not worry about being polite. We need to not worry about, overburdening people with information, or with messages. Like we need to be the loud ones. And there's a lot of asks. There's a lot of things proposed for changes, and we don't want this. So we think one thing to do that this coalition can do is we have numbers and we have voice. So let's send a message loud and clear to the Senate budget subcommittee chair that was in that hearing that is kind of, in discussion about this, and then her counterpart in the assembly that, this is relevant for as well. So let's start there, send their legislative directors and their chief of staff a clear message that this coalition is opposed to that option. So I'm going to, we basically have a sample email here. It doesn't explain all the technical information because it just would be too much, and people are moving so quick. They just need to know, are you opposed or are you in support of something? We try to make it, what was put out there. How do we feel about it? So this is a sample email to Senator Menjivar, Carolyn Menjivar, and would go to Cameron Urkowski, which is her chief of staff, and Jessica Gawley, her legislative director. You could obviously, if you want to put information about your organization there or anything, that's totally fine. But this is basically the, what this first paragraph is sort of what was said. Second paragraph is we are strongly opposed. And then likewise on the assembly side, very similar email to Assemblymember Corey Jackson's chief of staff and legislative director. And I should say that these two, this senator and this assembly member, they are not, they are both very in support of supporting foster youth. The challenge is they're trying to come up with creative solutions. They know there's budget cuts. They want to do the right thing, but they need correct information and they need to know how people feel about these things so that they can do their job. So we want to send this message to them loud and clear before they start thinking that this is a good option. Please CC me on those emails so I can kind of see how much communication they're getting. And if you have any questions, of course, reach out. We'll also send, because I know you're probably like, well, I can't copy that right now. We'll email this information out to everyone later this afternoon so that you can go ahead and do that, whether at end of day today or, tomorrow morning. So I'll pause there and just see if people have questions or thoughts or other ideas. Or Amy, if there's anything you want to add.
I think I would just underscore what you're saying, Simone, like we literally had a meeting with Senator Tom Umberg this morning and his office. And the quote I wrote down is the loudest voices will be the ones who win, like, which is not usually how we do our business. Like we're very, we're just not like that. Usually it's like but we're going to push ourselves out of our comfort zone to be respectful for sure, but unequivocal. And so we're going to kind of go into another mode, which is, we've gotten this from two very reliable, very experienced people, which is, it's different. This budget thing is real. Everyone's going to take a haircut. And so we're going to move out of the kind of more technical mode into a more emphatic, clear, direct mode. And this Mr. Umberg staff was really just like, we need, op-eds like this, and we need more storytelling. And so, again, and these are very experienced people who are swimming in these waters day in and day out. And so I just think we really need to take their good advice, and be, and what his quote was, the work really starts after the May revise. And I was like, what do you mean? We haven't been working? But that's what he's like, yeah, the work starts after the May revise. And I was like, wow, I thought we were working. But that's a good kind of, level setting for me. And I can't imagine you, Simone. I mean, we're already tired, but he's like, oh no, the work just starts after May revise. So it's time to breathe deep and accept the fact we're in for 2 more hard months of jamming, and that the people who do this will be successful and the people who don't will not, because we are competing with a lot of things like the University of California that has like a team of paid lobbyists. Like we're competing with much better resourced stakeholders than us, but we have a righteous cause. We have an amazing coalition and I know we can do it, but it was a little bit of a gut punch. But after I absorbed it, I'm just like, okay, thanks for being real with us. We need to bring this message to the full coalition and let's do it.
And about op-eds, and I mean, I see at least 1, 2, 3 people on this call right now, 4 that have done op-eds. I mean, so thank you. That's amazing. And we need them now more than ever. And the governor is responsive to media. So, once we get, like Amy said, once we start the real work after May revise. So if anyone is like, well, I didn't write one before, I want to jump in now. Daniel Heimpel and Kevin Clark are still willing to help people craft those op-eds, get them placed in newspapers. So definitely reach out to them if you think that you're ready to do that, because now would be a fantastic time for op-eds. So before we shift gears, I put
Daniel's email in the chat.
Thank you.
He is extremely committed to working with you, no matter your level of experience writing op-eds.
So before we shift gears, I just want to stop here, see if people have questions about reaching out to Senator Menjivar or Assemblymember Jackson's staff, or just questions about any of this, before we move to the next sort of action. Carolyn.
Hey, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I came late, so I think I missed like part of the beginning part. So just for context, are we they were proposing, I guess, in the committee meeting to get rid of SELP and instead just use the rates proposal?
Not exactly. It's something close to that, but I know Andre just joined as well, so I'll do the 1-minute recap, and then I'm also happy to talk to you two separately if you have more questions. In the hearing on the 21st and 25th in the Senate, under the rates reform discussion, they were talking about the amount that youth would receive monthly. Instead of accurately saying they're going to be receiving $1,788, they're sort of referring to the full state investment, which is inclusive of this $500 strengths building rate that does not go directly to youth. And we're not confident that this would reach every youth, and youth would be restricted in how they could use it. And this third party spending plan manager would get the money and then have to spend it on behalf of young people. It's at the end of the day, what it is not monthly income. So it shouldn't be considered part of the picture of the monthly income when considering whether that monthly income is sufficient to afford housing. And so what was floated, I won't say it was proposed, but it was something that was thrown out there, like, well, hey, we're trying to make solutions. So would a good solution be, that $2,288 that was being kind of painted as a monthly income? What about we just resource the 5 counties that would have monthly payments that would have been higher than that if the SILP housing supplement had moved forward? So we just resource those 5 counties, like the Santa Cruzes, the San Francisco, the most expensive ones. And the answer is no, absolutely not. That doesn't work. That doesn't do the job, because youth don't have $2,288 a month. They have $1,788. So let's base it on those numbers. So that is what was sort of floated. And then that topic has now been sort of discussed by some folks, and it's raised concern among us that this could be being seriously considered. And what the communications that we've received is, you have to be loud and clear that your coalition is opposed to this option. So it's very clear to those in the Senate and the Assembly that might consider this, why that would still lead to homelessness among youth and SILPs. So that's sort of what this slide was about. And then these are sample emails to Senator Menjivar and Assemblymember Jackson, who are the chairs of the respective Budget Human Services committees, to let their staff know we are opposed to that option. It is not an option. It's a non-starter.
Well, and if you want to read the full, all the different bulleted reasons, I just put in the chat the memo that we're circulating, like reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, reason 4. I mean, it all boils down to what Simone is saying. Young people aren't getting $22.88; they're only getting $17.88. But that memo, they're not guaranteed it. It's not paid directly to them. They have to use the extra $500 for housing instead of for extracurriculars, as rate reform is intended. They don't have caregivers, or service providers to help them access it, so they're disadvantaged. I mean, each of these points goes into it, just so you know, like,
Amy, you said those are in the chat? Where in the chat?
I'll chat it again right here. It's in this document.
And I should also say, because we received that feedback about, just being like, basically don't say you have concerns, say you are opposed, like be very pointed and clear about and strong about your opposition. We are going to actually even rework that memo to be stronger and make more declarative statements or whatnot. So, but the arguments, like Amy's saying, the arguments are those bulleted arguments, and we're happy to even share, the updated memo, if people are interested in reading it.
Well, and I think in fairness, we have to recognize this rate reform, like it is, no one intends to have the $500 not reach the young people. Everyone's acting in good faith, but we all know without a caregiver or placement provider, a young person in a SILP is just out in the world doing their thing. The kind of administrative navigation to actually get that money on a regular basis practically is not going to happen. And again, why should they have to use that for housing when every other placement, including young people in THP NMD, get to use it for extracurriculars? So I guess if you're in a SILP, you don't need that stuff. So we want, this is for equity. But again, if you have any questions about that, but like, I know some of them you probably didn't want to share because we haven't had that punchier language, but I do think it's important for you to know. And I think also this compromise was generated in good faith, but the reality is they're not getting that higher number. So yeah.
And to be optimistic, let's put some positive, they could just say, we don't really care. We're not going to even offer an option. We're moving forward as is. The fact that they're trying to think about ways to find what they're thinking is a middle ground is better than not, right? So let's take that positive and say, but let's get a real, let's not compromise. Let's get all the way there to what we're asking for. But, even worse, we could just be getting nothing. Getting meaning like no communication, no thinking even of how to address the issue. So I don't know, trying to be positive, but we have a long way to go. Like that was not a middle ground. We don't want a middle ground. We want youth homelessness prevented. So that's where we are. Should we move maybe into what's to come next week? That's going to be really important in some hours here. I think not even days. So Amy,
So I'm sure as many of you know, the May revise or, the May budget revision, the Newsom administration will release it. I mean, everyone is saying tomorrow. And that is, they take their first bite. At the budget, they propose their first budget in January. Then there are a bunch of budget hearings. They listen, they adapt, they see how much money we collect, through our state taxes. And then they issue a revision. And that revision, the dream scenario would be they have heard all of our concerns and they've said, oops, we made a mistake. And, but we don't expect that will be the case. And so, like it says here, we do not anticipate the SILP or HNMP will be restored in the budget. And so we need to express our disappointment about that. If that is indeed the case. And so we really, again, this is democracy in action. We aren't going to get it unless we ask for it. And so it's a simple, clear email communication. We're asking every coalition organization to send to the governor about, again, if it's in there, then we will not ask you to send it. And so we will wait for the May revise to come out. We will rigorously look at it. If those items are not in there, we will send you all an email and then want you to email the governor. But that is the opportunity for the administration to change their mind. But we don't anticipate that likely happening. And so then as our legislative colleagues have said, then the games really begin, because at that point we have kind of what the tax revenue is, we kind of have what the governor's thinking, and then we're really getting down to brass tacks. Mara, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, so just to clarify, You want the Menjivar and the other assembly letters to go out today, tomorrow,
Right,
but wait on the governor.
right. Because the May revise is not out. We want to, we have to make sure what we're writing is accurate. And who knows? It's not a zero probability. But it's, we certainly haven't heard of that commitment. So, but we want, we have to wait and make sure that what we're communicating is accurate. So stay tuned for Monday with sample emails. And in terms of the op-ed strategy, that's another powerful, that's a hugely timely event. And so May revise came out, like it's another kind of big framing vehicle for an op-ed. It's like, we spent all this time trying to make the case, we're still here, and we're sadly not, the governor didn't do that. But again, we need to kind of see if that is the case, and it probably won't be though. All right, can you put in the chat the emails for the senators? That's a great idea. Can you do that, Simone? Any other questions or ways that we can support you? Simone, is there anything you want to share about the meetings you're doing next week? I mean,
I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
yeah. Mhm.
Sorry about that. I'm driving, so I have my camera off. Yeah, I just have a lot of things swirling in my head about how do we, better communicate, really our message in this global message that's being communicated about this $1 billion or whatever. I've been hearing different numbers that's going to come into the system, and and try to stay, where it doesn't get. It feels like it's very, and I would just say, the other side that's saying that, yeah, this is great, all this money's coming in and it's not going to get lost, it's going to the kids, and and we know that there's all these unresolved issues around this third party, and it just feels like how do we, and I guess I'm kind of talking off the top of my head, but with Youth Law Center, who's been, we had a meeting with Brian Blaylock and his folks, and it feels like, how do we get a win, even if this May revise comes out and it's not what we're looking for, how do we also attach a win to this race reform that's coming downhill, like feels like the CCR disaster that happened, and we know that was a disaster. So, how do we have an alternative strategy that, we stay on this lane, but then what do we ask for on the other end that still gets us what we're trying to accomplish? I don't know if I'm making sense, but, and just so you know, I'm going to be with Senator Cortese at 6 o'clock today. So I want to also be in his ear about, this whole issue, because,
Great.
I think, Andre, what unless I'm misunderstanding, what you're saying is, at what point do we sort of compromise and say, okay, we can't get exactly what we want, so let's get
I don't think
something
he's saying
better.
that. I think he's talking about this relative to larger $1 billion rate reform. He's saying, like, I don't think it's when do we compromise? It's how do we think about this kind of, these two slivers relative to the larger rate reform? But
yeah, absolutely. How do we get a win, regardless of what door it comes through, that we get the best that we can for the young folks that we're trying to serve? And also, I think also, because there's just so much noise about, this train that seems to be off track that's coming, how do we also communicate that, that this is, going to be just another really just failed process, as we've seen so many oftentimes when the system just moves forward without, making sure everyone's at the table really thinking through the unintended consequences that happen on the ground.
well, my opinion of that is, for this is to be as surgical. You are all people who are caring for two powerful solutions, and to be as surgical as you can. These two things are what we want. Now, some version of rate reform is probably gonna get passed, and then there's gonna be probably several years of cleanup. It doesn't go into effect for some time. It's unfortunate that these things are happening at the same time, but we want to get something before we get everything. And what we can get is these two things. So rate reform, something is probably going to go through, and then we're going to wake up on July 2nd and start to reform that. So, but you know, it is complex. There is a lot going on, but to try and stay focused on these policy proposals. Otherwise, I don't think we can really swallow the ocean. There is so much to it. And there's so much momentum, but again, it doesn't go into effect on July 2nd. No one says after, July 1st, we can't fix what has just been passed. That happens all the time. So, we should, feel urgent in some way, but we can still keep working on this after this budget proposal.
And Andre, just to, speak to the rate reform effort, there are a lot of people that are asking for different things like pausing or, different solutions to try to address what you're raising, which is like that there feels to be dysfunction, or there feels to be like it's not ready, right? And of course, none of us know where that will land, but I think the more that we say that we're going to try to solve this within rates reform, we move away from what our approach is. So we want to ask for our approach up until that final hour. Like, we want to keep trying to get exactly what we're asking for versus trying to get something else in rate reform.
I got you. All right. So we don't want to show our cards early. We just want to stay on this road, and then, but kind of in the back pocket, you guys have been thinking through another alternative, so that we can at least get a win. It sounds like that's what I'm hearing.
Well, we've been thinking through what might be proposed and then trying to think through what that would look like. We're trying to just be prepared for anything to achieve the goal of youth not experiencing homelessness. So I think to the very end, we're going to ask for what we're asking for, but of course we're also thinking about what might be shot our way, right? And how to respond to it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to stay on
Happy
point
to
with
talk more.
Yeah, I'll stay on point tonight with Cortese about the same things that we've been talking about. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Andre. Well, I know we're a little bit over time, so I'm going to let everyone go, but also happy to have follow-up conversations if people want to talk more.